Hello, third grade, and welcome to lesson 2 of module 6 in science. This lesson is going to focus on natural hazards and how they change our environments. Now we're going to go ahead and get started in our workbook. As always, we're going to read the scenario here, read through the different friends, decide which of the friends you agree with the most. You'll put their name right here, and then explain using complete sentences why you agree with that friend. Once completed, we're going to go on to our next page and we're going to watch a video of a wildfire and write down any questions that we have. Then read about our STEM career connection for the ecologist and answer questions 1 and 2 relating to that reading. And then answer our essential question, what are natural hazards and how can they change the environment? Let's go ahead and watch our video on the wildfire. Okay, now take a moment to go in and to write down at least 3 questions that you have about the video you just watched. And again, read about the ecologist and answer the related questions. Moving on, we're going to take a look at our vocabulary for this lesson. Our vocabulary words are the words environment, natural hazard, flood, earthquake, landslide, and tornado. Let's go ahead and take a look at the meaning of all of our new vocabulary words and talk about them. So the word environment is all the living and non-living things that surround an organism. So the place that it lives, not just the other animals and plants that live there, but the non-living things like the soil or the rocks or the water or the amount of sunlight it gets. Those are all parts of the environment that an organism or a living thing lives in. A natural hazard is some kind of natural event, so something that happens in nature. It's not caused by people, like a flood or an earthquake or a hurricane, but it causes a lot of damage. So we're not looking at small things. We're talking about things that that can destroy a habitat, things that can change a land area. So if you have a flood, how it'll wipe out a lot of the plants and things that are in the area. Or an earthquake can cause damage and cause things like buildings to fall. A flood is when you have dry land that gets covered with water very quickly. An earthquake is a sudden movement in the rocks that make up the Earth's crust. So that's a lot of times that happens when the tectonic plates are rubbing against each other or one is sliding over another one. A landslide is really quick movement of rocks and soil downhill. So it's like a flood, except with dirt and rocks. And a tornado is a powerful storm that spins in a circular motion. So it spins round and round, looks like a funnel. And tornadoes happen over land. These are different than hurricanes. Hurricanes have to begin over water. So tornadoes are on land, or they start on land, and hurricanes start on water. Now we're going to watch a video that's called Environmental Changes to see what happens to different environments. And then we're going to answer these questions. So question number 1 says, what are 3 things that change environments? Number 2, what do you think is the next thing that will happen to the forest after a fire? And number 3, what might happen if there is a long period with no rain? So we're going to think about these 3 questions as we watch our video.
Did you know that environments can change? Look at this beautiful forest scene. There are healthy green grasses and colorful wildflowers in bloom. A deer has stopped to search for food. The trees are full of leaves. This is what a forest looks like after a forest fire. The forest floor is now covered in ash. The trees have no leaves and their trunks are black. All of the animals were forced to leave and find new homes. Let's look at another example. This lake is full of fish and insects. The trees are healthy and there are plenty of plants and vibrant flowers. This is what a lake can look like when there is no rain for a long time. The lake has dried up. The soil is so dry that it has formed deep cracks. The plants and animals that once lived here have had to move to be able to survive. Here we have a very large area covered with trees and grass. Here is what this area would look like after being turned into a neighborhood. There are now houses, sidewalks, and roads. What types of environmental changes have you seen near where you live or go to school?
Okay, let's go ahead and play the video one more time. While we do that, I want you to think about the questions that we talked about, the questions that you need to answer for your workbook. So again, our questions are, what are 3 things that change an environment? What do you think the next thing will happen after the forest fire? And what might happen if there's a long period of no rain? So let's watch it one more time so we can answer our questions.
Did you know that environments can change? Look at this beautiful forest scene. There are healthy green grasses and colorful wildflowers in bloom. A deer has stopped to search for food. The trees are full of leaves. This is what a forest looks like after a forest fire. The forest floor is now covered in ash. The trees have no leaves and their trunks are black. All of the animals were forced to leave and find new homes. Let's look at another example. This lake is full of fish and insects. The trees are healthy and there are plenty of plants and vibrant flowers. This is what a lake can look like when there is no rain for a long time. The lake has dried up. The soil is so dry that it has formed deep cracks. The plants and animals that once lived here have had to move to be able to survive. Here we have a very large area covered with trees and grass. Here is what this area would look like after being turned into a neighborhood. There are now houses, sidewalks, and roads. What types of environmental changes have you seen near where you live or go to school?
Okay, let's go ahead and move on. Now we're going to take a look at our textbook and we're going to read pages 144 to 146 so that we can answer these questions. So we're going to focus on the question, which different ways can a volcano change land and what causes damage from an earthquake? Volcanoes. A volcano is a mountain that builds up around an opening in Earth's crust. Magma is melted rock from parts of the mantle and crust. This melted rock rises up through the opening. When the magma flows onto land, this is called lava. Lava can flow slowly over land or bubble up around a volcano's opening. Some volcanoes explode or erupt with more rock and ash than lava. When a volcano erupts quickly with a lot of energy, parts of the volcano may be blown apart. The sides of a volcano may be blasted away in an instant. Volcano eruptions change the land in other ways too. After lava flows along the Earth's surface, it cools and hardens. Over time, the hardened rock builds up around the volcano to form a mountain. A volcanic mountain can take many years to form. If a volcano erupts often, however, a volcanic mountain can form in just a few years. Between 50 and 70 volcanoes erupt on land each year. Volcanoes that erupt are often called active volcanoes. Mount St. Helens in Washington state is an example of an active volcano. Some volcanoes are not active, yet scientists think they may still erupt. These volcanoes are called dormant volcanoes. Mauna Kea, or one of the volcanoes that make up the big island of Hawaii, is dormant. Scientists think it last erupted about 4,500 years ago. Volcanoes that have not erupted for at least 10,000 years are called extinct volcanoes. It can be hard to know if a volcano is extinct or just dormant. Underwater volcanoes. There are also many active volcanoes in the ocean floor. Underwater volcanoes send out lava, ash, and rock into the ocean. When the lava hardens into rock, a volcanic mountain may rise up out of the sea. The Hawaiian Islands were formed from underwater volcanoes. Only one of these islands includes an active volcano today. Volcanologist. Interested in finding out what makes volcanoes erupt? Do you want to learn warning signs that could help keep people safe? You may be interested in a career as a volcanologist. Learn more about what these volcano scientists do in the career section. Earthquakes. An earthquake is a shaking of Earth's surface. Earthquakes are caused by movement in the Earth's crust. The crust is made of huge slabs of rock. The slabs can slowly move past each other and can press against each other. They can pull apart too. These movements happen along large cracks called faults. When the crust suddenly moves along these faults, the area above the fault can shake. An earthquake can cause more than just a rumble. It can cause vibrations at the place where the two plates hit each other. The vibrations move out in all directions at once. The area closest to the center of the quake have the strongest vibrations. The areas farther away have weaker vibrations. Some earthquakes are strong enough to make an opening in the ground. Earthquakes can also cause damage to buildings and roadways. So let's go back and take a look at our questions. Which different ways can a volcano change land? That was on the previous pages that we read. So if you go back and take a look at pages 144 and 145, talking about volcanoes, these two pages give you information to answer your question. And what causes damage from an earthquake? That's going to be over here on page 146. Okay, next we're going to explore an interactive activity called wildfires on the effects of a fire in a forest. And we're going to answer this question after we're done. Describe one negative effect and one positive effect of a wildfire. So what's one bad thing that happens because of a fire, and what's one good thing that happens because of a fire?
Look at the images and read about wildfires. Wildfires can destroy plants and the homes of animals. Smoke from the fires also pollutes the air. Plants and animals will return in time after a wildfire. New plants can grow after a while. A wildfire does not destroy all life in a forest. The clearing of the forest floor makes it a good place for new plants to quickly grow. It's interesting that something so destructive can have benefits too.
Here we're talking about things that are good in a wildfire, so positive things that can come from a wildfire. And on the previous page, here we have the negative things. So it's only 2 slides, super quick, to help you answer your question. Now for pages 148 and 149 in our textbook, we're going to answer questions 7 and 8. How might land have changed after a flood dries up? And number 8, natural hazards might cause other hazards to occur. What hazards might cause a landslide? So let's go ahead and flip over to pages 148 and 149. Here we're going to read about floods and landslides. Water can slowly change the land, or it can change the land quickly. Sometimes more rain falls than can soak into the ground. Water quickly fills rivers and streams. If a river cannot hold the water flows over its banks, causing a flood. A flood is water that flows over land that is normally dry. Rapid melting of snow can cause flooding. Floods can be very strong and dangerous. The heavy flow of water can wash away large objects such as cars. Floods can change the shape of the land by eroding soil quickly. Even after the flood is over, the land may stay reshaped. A river's course may be changed. Buildings, bridges, roads, and crops may be washed away. Sediment carried by the floodwater may have been deposited on land. Floods can cover streets and make it impossible for cars to pass. So over here, let's review this reading. Now, they use a lot of vocabulary words that we talked about in previous lessons and chapters about erosion and deposition. So if water is eroding, the flood water is causing erosion, that means it's picking up pieces of dirt and rocks and things and carrying them away with it. When they're being deposited, they're being dropped somewhere new. So they're being placed somewhere new. Landslides. A landslide is the rapid movement of rocks and soil down a hill or a mountain. Heavy rocks, trees, and land are pulled down the hill by gravity. Landslides can happen quickly and cause damage to property. Landslides may occur when soil loosens because of the heavy rain or melting snow. Some landslides may occur without warning. Others can happen after earthquakes shake loose large areas of rock or soil on hillsides. Landslides can happen on land or on the ocean floor. Landslides on hills and mountains can destroy homes and roads. They can bury large areas. Underwater landslides can form giant waves. A landslide can destroy homes and cause damage to property. So here you can see the effects of a flood. Here you can see the effects of a landslide. Let's go back and revisit our questions. How might land have changed after a flood dries up? So that answer is going to be more in the second period over here, or second paragraph right here. And for our next question, natural hazards might cause other hazards to occur. What hazards might cause a landslide? So over here, when we're talking about landslides and what causes them, our answers are going to be right here. Next, let's go in and take a look at our activity on droughts, landslides, floods on the effects of these three natural hazards. So we're going to talk about what these three natural hazards can do. And then we're going to answer the question, compare the effects of a landslide and a flood. How are they the same? So we're looking for similarities here.
A drought happens when there is no rain for a long period of time. When that happens, rivers and lakes can dry up. The soil also dries out. Living things that need water struggle to survive. A landslide is caused by heavy rainfall and hurricanes. Landslides cause damage when the soil on steep areas slides downhill. The plants and animals that lived here might have to find a new place to live. The environment might not provide the resources they need. A flood is when a piece of land that is usually dry suddenly gets covered with water. You can see in this image how the streets and houses are covered by water. The animals and plants can lose their habitat.
Okay, so let's stop and think, what is the same about floods and landslides? So we talked about droughts, we talked about floods, and we talked about landslides. Let's take a look at our question. And here they're specifically asking us about a landslide and a flood and how they are the same. Now here we can take a look at the effects of a landslide, and I'll play this slide for you guys one more time to listen to, and then we'll play the slide on floods once more as well.
A landslide is caused by heavy rainfall and hurricanes. Landslides cause damage when the soil on steep areas slides downhill. The plants and animals that lived here might have to find a new place to live. The environment might not provide the resources they need. A flood is when a piece of land that is usually dry suddenly gets covered with water. You can see in this image how the streets and houses are covered by water. The animals and plants can lose their habitat.
So think about the similarities as far as what's happening to the animals, what's happening to the plants, what's happening to the buildings and the homes that might be in that area that people use as well. Okay, next we're going to hop over to page 245, and we're going to read pages 170 and 172 in our textbook and answer questions 12 and 13. What kind of weather does a hurricane bring? And what are some ways to stay safe in hurricanes and tornadoes? Weather events, tornadoes. A tornado is a severe storm with rotating winds that form over land. It looks like a big, tall funnel. Tornadoes form as the air between the thunderstorm cloud and the ground begin to move and spin. Tornadoes can destroy buildings and pick up items such as heavy as a truck. The force of the wind can throw the items hundreds of meters away. The path of some tornadoes are narrow. Several buildings on a street may be damaged even though they are untouched, even though others are untouched. Other tornadoes may be 1.6 kilometers or 1 mile wide. Tornado safety. Before a tornado hits, you may notice dark or greenish clouds in the sky. You may see rotating clouds in the distance. If you see a tornado or a tornado warning is announced, go to the basement of a building right away. You may also go to an inside room of a building where there are no windows. Tornadoes, sometimes called twisters, can travel more than 160 kilometers or more than 100 miles. Derechos. A derecho is a strong windstorm that travels straight over long distances. A derecho may happen when a series of thunderstorms form over a large area. The wind of a derecho can reach speeds of 160 kilometers or 100 miles per hour. The storm can be a few miles wide or hundreds of miles long. Derechos form most often in the late spring and when the air is warm. The storms may last for hours. They can severely damage trees, homes, and power lines. Derecho safety. Derechos bring strong, damaging winds. They can make sure nothing outside can blow away or cause further damage. They can also gather flashlights and other emergency supplies in case winds damage power lines. The straight line winds of a derecho cause heavy damage. Derecho means straight in Spanish. These windstorms form long, straight lines of wind damage. Okay, so here we can answer our questions. What kind of weather does a hurricane bring? What are some ways to stay safe in hurricanes and tornadoes? So we went through 170 and 171. Let's finish up reading 172 on hurricanes, and then we'll be able to answer all of those questions. A hurricane is a large storm with strong winds and heavy rains. A hurricane starts as a storm above warm ocean water. Rising warm air causes the storm to rotate. When winds reach 119 kilometers or 74 miles per hour, the storm is called a hurricane. Some of the strongest hurricanes can reach wind speeds over 249 kilometers or 155 miles per hour. Hurricane clouds rotate around a calm area near the center, called the eye. When a hurricane hits land, it can bring intense winds and cause flooding. Hurricanes weaken over land. The warm waters that fed the storm are left behind. Hurricane safety. Scientists track hurricanes as they form and move. People may be asked to prepare to leave the area to stay safe. People prepare for heavy rains and strong winds. Hurricanes can cause great damage. This picture shows what a hurricane looks like from space. So now that we've read about hurricanes, tornadoes, and derechos, we can go ahead and answer these questions. What kind of weather does a hurricane bring? That was going to be on our first set of pages. Or sorry, on this current page right here, page 172. And then what are some ways to stay safe in hurricanes and tornadoes? That's going to be on both of these pages where it says hurricane safety over here and where it says tornado safety. So pages 170 and 172 are where you're going to find your responses for these questions. Next, we're going to look at the interactive titled Tornadoes and Hurricanes and answer this question after we finish. How are hurricanes and tornadoes the same and how are they different?
Click on the slides to see photos of tornado and hurricane damage. How are the two natural hazards similar? How are they different? A tornado is a natural hazard with the strongest winds of all. A tornado damages everything in its path and happens very quickly. You can see all of the houses that were damaged in this town from a tornado. Think about the effects to plants and animals. What has happened to their resources? This picture shows the damage done by a hurricane. A hurricane is a natural hazard caused by strong winds and heavy rains. Think about the effects to the plants and animals. The resources they need to survive have been affected. Some animals will migrate, while other animals and plants adapt to the changes to survive.
Okay, so let's stop and think. How are hurricanes and tornadoes the same and how are they different? So ways that they are similar is the types of damage that they can cause. Ways that they are different is when you think about what causes them or where they begin. So go back and review those slides once more, and then you'll be able to put in your complete answer for this section. Okay, next we're going to move to page 248 and investigate the changing ecosystems to see how different changes affect an ecosystem. And then we're going to answer the questions after we've finished. How does the amount of grass affect the rabbit and hawk populations? What evidence do you have that shows the drought affected the ecosystem? And what happens to an ecosystem after a fire? So here we're going to explore how organisms depend on each other. How do you think the rabbits and the hawks interact? Did you make your decision? Observe the number of hawks and rabbits with the bar graph. Now here we have a grassy area. We have a lot of rabbits. We have about 3 hawks, but as the rabbit population slowly changes, it goes up and down a little bit with the number of hawks. It stays pretty stable. It stays around 20. We have about 3 hawks in the area. Sometimes we get a little bit more. As there's more food available, you're going to also have more predators in the area as well. Okay, did you watch the hawks catch the rabbits? Was there a different number of each animal at the end? Why do you think this happened? So as the rabbits are reproducing and having more baby rabbits, the hawks are, you'll see more hawks come into the area. So now if we add and remove rabbits, we can take a look at what happens when we change the rabbit population in the area. So if we decrease the number of rabbits, now we still have those same 3 hawks, but when we had fewer rabbits, the hawks were eating through the rabbit population very quickly. And when there was very, very few rabbits left, the hawk population also decreased. There was fewer hawks because there was less food available for them. Okay, so for the next section, we're going to take a look at what happens with a drought. Now, a drought is when there's not enough rainfall in an area and the land gets really, really dry. Now, remember, the rabbits need the grass to be able to eat. That's their food. So if there's a drought and those grasses dry up, you notice that the rabbit population starts to decrease very quickly. Now we still have about 2 to 3 hawks in the area, but as the rabbit population decreases, the hawks will decrease. As the rabbit population increases, the number of hawks there will also increase. Okay, let's go back to our pages. How does the amount of grass affect the rabbit and hawk population? So think about when there was plenty of grass, what was happening with the numbers, and when there was a drought, when there was not very much grass, what happened to the numbers? For number 19, what evidence do you have that shows the drought affected the ecosystem? So how did it change the area and the populations of those different animals? And for number 20, what happens to an ecosystem after a fire? So let's go back and we're going to continue seeing what happens. So this time we're going to have a fire rather than the drought and see how it affects the area. So if there was a fire, it burned through a lot of what was already there, but you can see that with the fire, it also clears the land. So it makes room for new grasses and plants to grow. So here you can see the rabbit population is increasing. The hawk population is also increasing as there's more grass and food available for the rabbits. There's more rabbits. With more rabbits, there will be more hawks because there's more food available for the hawks now. So think about what happened after the fire. So initially right after the fire, you'll see that a lot of animals may relocate. A lot of plants would have died out, but you'll also see after that, with a little bit of time, that fire clears the land and allows space for new things to grow and maybe new animals to move in. All right, that takes us to the end of these pages. Let's go ahead and jump into our next pages. We're going to watch a video called Natural Hazards on the various weather events, and then we're going to answer these questions. Number 1, when do we call something a natural disaster? Number 2, find out about a natural disaster that occurred. What type of natural disaster was it? And number 3, what evidence can you use to argue that it was a natural disaster?
Wow, look at those clouds. They are big and fluffy and white. But sometimes clouds can get dark and scary. Then the wind blows and rain starts to fall. It is a storm. There can also be lightning and heavy rain. Sometimes a storm can have a tornado with strong winds in the shape of a funnel. Too much rain and it can cause a flood. A storm that forms over water with strong winds can grow into a hurricane. Lightning hitting the ground can sometimes cause wildfires. What do all these things have in common? All of these weather events happen naturally. And when they are severe enough, that is when we call them a natural disaster. There are many things we can do to help prevent disaster, but it's important to know that sometimes they are just going to happen. We are always learning ways to best protect ourselves when a natural disaster strikes.
Okay, let's go back and rewatch the video so that we can find the answers to our questions.
Wow, look at those clouds. They are big and fluffy and white. But sometimes clouds can get dark and scary. Then the wind blows and rain starts to fall. It is a storm. There can also be lightning and heavy rain. Sometimes a storm can have a tornado with strong winds in the shape of a funnel. Too much rain and it can cause a flood. A storm that forms over water with strong winds can grow into a hurricane. Lightning hitting the ground can sometimes cause wildfires. What do all these things have in common? All of these weather events happen naturally. And when they are severe enough, that is when we call them a natural disaster. There are many things we can do to help prevent disaster, but it's important to know that sometimes they are just going to happen. We are always learning ways to best protect ourselves when a natural disaster strikes.
Okay, let's go ahead and answer our questions. Okay, when do we call something a natural disaster? It has to be something that happened in nature and it has to be severe where it's causing damage. You can talk about any of the natural disasters that we saw. You can talk about a hurricane, or you could talk about earthquakes or floods, whichever ones you decide to pick. And then tell me, give me reasons to explain why that particular weather event is considered a natural disaster. So use things that we've learned in the lesson, use research, you can use your textbook, and write down complete sentences that support your answer. Okay, and lastly, we're going to go on to pages 261 and 262. Or sorry, 251 and 252. Now think about the photos that we saw about the environment change after fires. Use evidence and engage in argument over whether a small fire should be used to prevent large fires. So ask the question that you will answer to decide whether small fires should be used to prevent larger ones. Conduct research, so you can do this either using your book, or you can do it using books out of our library or researching online. List the positive and negative effects of a fire on an ecosystem. Could a wildfire be a solution? Choose an answer and use evidence to support it. So figure out yes or no, which one you think, and give me reasons to support your answer. Then we're going to rewatch the video of the wildfire. What are natural hazards and how can they change environments? And we don't need to complete the I did statement. So let's go ahead and jump back. I'll play the video of the wildfires once more. Then we'll answer our final questions and be done with this lesson. Okay, go ahead and complete your answer. Once you're done with that, make sure you go back and check all of your work very carefully. Make sure you use neat handwriting, complete sentences, and that you use evidence to support your answers. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.